On this week's press briefings, we take you to the United Nations headquarters in New York, where Prime Minister Mia Amor Motley led the conversation on climate change and its impact on our region during the Climate Action Summit. Take a listen.
Mr. Secretary General, forgive me for my bluntness as I am constrained by the 180 seconds to speak on the fate and needs of 20% of the United Nations membership as we seek to save our countries and our people from the ravages of devastating hurricanes, droughts, and fires, and the insidious slow onset of acidification, ocean acidification, and sea level rise. The science is clear, and the evidence is even clearer, that the lives of our people have been lost and properties abandoned, and these tell the story far better than any speech we can make in this great hall. The AOSIS, the Alliance of Small Island States, needs to keep temperatures increases in this global community to less than 1.5 to stay alive. Not to thrive, but to stay alive. In other words, 2 degrees needs to be taken off the table once and for all. And let us be clear, the increase in 1 degree in temperature has already brought us to where we are today, has already brought us this unacceptable high level of catastrophic damage and loss of life. Within less than a decade or 2, it will be virtually impossible to contain the temperature increases to 1.5 degrees unless we act now and with absolute dispatch. Make no mistake, there will be mass migration by climate refugees that will destabilize the countries of the world that are not on the front line of this climate crisis. No country can stand up to it alone. For us, our best practice traditionally was to share the risk before disaster strikes. And just over a decade ago, we established the Caribbean Catastrophic Risk Insurance Facility. But the devastation of Hurricane Dorian marks a new chapter for us, because as an international community will find out, the CRIF, as we call it, will not meet the needs of climate refugees, or indeed will it be sufficient to meet the needs of rebuilding. No longer can we therefore consider this as an appropriate mechanism. We have as well to look at how best we can blend our public resources, and to that extent, our country has introduced natural disaster clauses in our bonds, as have other countries in the region. Barbados, therefore, recognizes the urgency of hosting an insurance colloquium for interested leaders at the national and state levels of independent nations and dependent territories to confront what we believe will be a growing crisis with respect to the affordability of insurance in our countries. Similarly, we believe, Mr. Secretary General, that the real solution is for us not to keep asking people to make commitments that are small in the hope that we reach there, but the global community must accept that it is within our power to halt and reverse climate change. If the world can make it possible to have driverless cars, then we surely can find it possible to be able to find the technology to halt and reverse this climate crisis. We must also at the same time urge those to contain the net emissions and to reduce them. Indeed, there simply can be no more coal power plants after 2020 if we are serious about our future. Each AOSIS member has committed to the SIDS ambition package, which means that we'll be submitting our aggressive NDCs by 2020. But we also commit to the long-term goal of net zero emission by 2050. We are fully and have always been committed to the Paris Agreement. In our own case in Barbados, we will lead by example. First, we have set the goal of becoming a fossil fuel-free country by 2030. We have to change out all of our transport systems and how we generate electricity. But this is a mammoth undertaking because the cost of electric buses is almost more than double what the cost of diesel buses are. And similarly, the transitioning to clean, renewable energy for our electricity requires significant investments in solar and wind, which we are planning out. Secondly, we will launch a most comprehensive climate resilience initiative by a small state, from roofs to reefs, where we seek to protect our homes and the roofs which cover our people, our freshwater resources, and our vital coral reefs. In short, we have now all to change how we build, and we must protect our existing reefs and rebuild the ones that we have lost. Thirdly, we are about to conclude a debt for nature swap arrangement in support of our blue economy, because at the end of the day, our maritime jurisdiction is 400 times that of our land jurisdiction. We have also committed to planting more than 1 million trees next year, when we have invited Barbadians from wherever they live across the world to come home and join us in this mammoth undertaking on 166 square miles. Fourthly, we have also embarked already on an ambitious mapping of the vulnerability of our critical infrastructure and key assets, like housing, roads, utilities, and reefs, because we have limited resources to apply and they must be efficiently allocated. This National Coastal Risk Information and Planning Platform is the guide for us, as it should be for all members of AOSIS. We, however, know the difficulties of small states, and I will not avoid the elephant in the room. Under the current official development assistance rules, which focus on GDP, the Bahamas, despite its extreme vulnerability to climate change, and despite the passage of Hurricane Dorian, will not have access to either grant or concessional resources as they begin the difficult task of rebuilding lives and livelihoods. These rules were not developed for such a time as this, and we need to change these rules that deny access to successful small countries, and we need to remove the bureaucracy attached thereto.
Thank you, Excellency.
But then again, if Dominica and Barbuda remain today without any meaningful assistance after Hurricanes Irma and Maria passed 2 years ago, we must ask ourselves if small states continue to remain invisible and dispensable to the global community. Indeed, the pledges of Barbuda, made for Barbuda, represented less than 10% of the money they needed to rebuild Barbuda. And even then, they have not collected those pledges. Similarly, Dominica, in the first 12 months after the catastrophe, was only able to access less than 10% of the pledged funds. So, Madam Chair and Mr. Secretary General, that is why we are committed to speaking to the young people of the world today, whose actions across 150 countries last Friday made it clear that they will die of we will die of old age, and they will die of climate change. As small states of the world, we will work with these young people, and we will continue to work with our influencers globally like Rihanna to urge that the resources must be found to halt and reverse climate change in our time for small states to stay alive. How the world's resources are applied within the global community of nations is within our power.
Thank you.
As I said in Geneva last week, the world finds it possible to apply resources to get rid of male baldness while it cannot find resources to cure malaria. These misplaced priorities will lose us the battle. If it was up to us, I say, and I will finish soon, I really will, but I'm speaking on behalf of 20% of the community of nations of this body. If it was up to our community of small nations to solve the problem of climate change, it would have been solved 3 decades ago when we raised it. We refuse to be relegated to the footnotes of history and to be collateral damage for the greed of others, for we have contributed less than 1% of greenhouse gas emissions. We have brought our plans as small nations. We are implementing them, and we have fully embraced the responsibility to act. The young people of the world demand climate justice, as do we. We thank Norway, Germany, and all others for the contributions that they have made yesterday and today to double their contributions to the Green Climate Fund. And we thank Qatar for their contribution today for the SIDS and landlocked countries. Others must now follow if we are to be fair to our children. The nations of the world are not fighting a losing battle, but the nations of the world are losing this battle today. It is within our power to win it. The only question is, will it be too late for the small nations of the world? Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency.
The other leaders on the panel participated in the question and answer segment of the dialogue.
The cry heard around the world last week was that our house is on fire, and we need to quench that fire. And so it's not just the youth around the globe, it's our own people around the globe asking us as caretakers of these burning houses, what are we going to do in this climate summit? Are we going to help quench the fire, or are we going to continue to light up the fire? And let's not forget the least small island, the small island developing states are the least contributors to the causes of climate change. But yet we are indeed on the front line of those changes. In fact, I dare say that we're not worried so much about what causes climate change, but the fact that we are living the impact of the climate crisis. It's climate crisis for us, and that's the worst part of it all. We want to be a part of the solution, however. We want to be a part of the answer. And because keeping greenhouse gas emissions below 1.5 degrees is our best hope for staying alive. We have plenty of sunshine, wind, ocean, and thermal energy sources in all SIDS territories. And we have very ambitious targets that have been set by all the SIDS countries. However, the clean energy targets is estimated to need at least $16 billion between now and 2030. 3 things are very clear, ladies and gentlemen, that needs to be there if we are going to meet our target. 1 is partnership, 2 is partnership, and 3 is partnership. Partnership that is needed to address the capacities, to mobilize resources, and to facilitate investments. That is why the SIDS have submitted a sustainable energy package, a blueprint that we hope will help us to partner, and leverage multilateral mechanism in order to achieve public-private partnerships. And together, as small island developing states, let's indeed be the leader to showcase that the world can be a better place. Finally, let me add another children's wise reminder to us. We are not inheriting the environment and the earth from our ancestors. We are merely borrowing it from our future children. Let's do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. Thank you. As we've seen this month, the Caribbean regularly experiences the worst impacts of climate change. Prime Minister Chasney, what can be done to make people safer in small islands developing states?
Well, thank you very much. I just want to publicly endorse these statements made by Prime Minister Motley. Very eloquent, very passionate, and very true. The problem that we have is that while mitigation is so important, in what's happening with the world, and I really want to applaud the efforts of the Secretary General in this one-man crusade that he's on in terms of waking up the world to what the reality is. And I want to echo the sentiments and the emotion of Greta, and that she could come here and condemn us all, and deservedly so. It is even worse for us as SIDS, in that for the last 4 years that we have been crying out loud that the clock is ticking for us. We are in the middle of our hurricane season and 9 months away from the next hurricane season. Yet, our voice is not heard. We have said repeatedly that the OECD needs to change the way it classifies developing countries, and that we've asked them to adopt the vulnerability index that was established in 1989 by the Commonwealth Secretariat, 1989. 2, that there needs to be a dedicated fund. So even though there are funds that were allocated yesterday to double up for the Green Climate Fund, the SIDS continue to lament the fact, the difficulty of us drawing down on those funds. 3, that once we establish those funds, the governance procedures that now manage those funds needs to change to take into consideration that the next hurricane season is upon us, and that we can't wait for a typical 5-year project cycle. And lastly, that how we classify the debt that we're going to incur to invest in this infrastructure cannot go on our books, because what we may gain in physical climate change resilience, we're now going to lose in economic resilience. The sad reality is that those 4 things require a pen. A pen for OECD to change its policy. A pen to establish a dedicated fund for the SIDS. A pen to change the governance structures, and a pen to determine how we're going to classify the debt. And time has run out on us. And we are pleading again to please allow the SIDS to build the adaptation that is required in order for us to deal with the other issues that we have to. As Prime Minister Motley has indicated, that we're soon going to be uninsurable. When I see small businesses in my country that their cost of insurance now has become 20% of their operating cost, we're now getting to where it's economically unsustainable to be able to have insurance. There is a new cost of these hurricanes which we had not anticipated, and that is one that Prime Minister Motley alluded to, which is refugees. In the case of Bahamas, 50,000 people are going to have to be evacuated. When we say temporarily, we're talking about 1.5 years to 2 years before those countries can be rebuilt. Who is going to sustain those people? Where are they going to go to school? What job are they going to have? These are the practical realities that we're dealing with on ground zero of SIDS. We don't have time or the luxury for all of the dialogue that is taking place. What would it take for one-day meeting in order that the major agencies involved, the multilaterals, the ODAs, just to agree on a quick solution to help us solve our problem? We are your incubator. I leave you with this last message. Climate change does not discriminate. It has started with us because we're close to the equator, but it's soon coming to your doorsteps. Allow the SIDS to be that lab of figuring out how we're going to be able to deal with this climate change issue. And through our solutions, you will also be helping yourself in the future. I thank you.
Excellency, thank you. There are no countries, as we all know, more vulnerable to the impacts of climate change than the low-lying atoll nations. President Saleh, what can the Maldives and others do to ensure a safe and prosperous future?
Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we come to these forums and reiterate the same points. That climate change is the defining issue of the 21st century. That a failure to address it, it will endanger the planet's health and the lives of every generation that follows us. That the science is irrefutable. We hope that the moral force of our argument is strong enough to finally compel the global community to take effective action, because we cannot compromise on our survival. Ladies and gentlemen, I am certain that other small island states present here today seek realistic solutions, just like us. This is precisely why the Maldives has formulated a holistic plan encompassing achievable targets for small islands to address the ravages of climate change. Our plan was further bolstered by the support we received from fellow members of the OASIS and SEEDS and other key development agencies to whom we remain grateful. Our climate-smart, resilient islands plan comprises deliverable targets around 11 key areas, including designation of environmentally protected areas, installation of new technology, establishing inter-island connectivity, safeguarding food and water security, promoting green tourism, ensuring climate-resilient infrastructure, transition into renewable energy, and sustainable waste management, among others. This plan outlined my vision for the Maldivian people. The pledges are realistic and achievable, and prioritize building a sustainable society in harmony with our fragile ecosystem. We intend to conserve eco-rich areas, phase out single-use plastic, rapidly transit to renewable energy in the transportation and tourism sectors. We have committed ourselves to a timeline with each target, and we fully intend to implement these while according full consideration to intergenerational partnerships, gender equality, and the role of youth. I call upon other SEEDS to replicate our model to achieve a post-carbon economy and climate-smart development pathway that will, in turn, safeguard our people from climate-associated risks in the future. However, to realize this initiative and for this to grow, finance needs to be made available. In 2010, a goal was set to make $100 billion of financing available for developing countries by 2020. We are in September 2019, and 2020 is just a few months away. It is with great regret I note that the realization of finance for that target is very below expectation. Among the available finance, the share is less for a vulnerable community like the SEEDS. Access to finance needs to change for the better. You have heard our concerns. We have told you about the measures that we intend to take. We are now asking you to do your due diligence. We are asking you to do better, to do more. Thank you.
Your Excellency, thank you so much. Director General Lecamera, the small islands developing states have set out a clear ambition to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions and to transition to 100% renewable energy. What support will the international community provide to achieve this?
Secretary General, Excellencies, Madam Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, the message of ARENA today is very simple and straightforward. We firmly believe that the change is possible. It's possible for our generation to reverse the path where economic growth, instead of wealth and well-being, is generating loss in the capacity of the planet to sustain life. It's possible to respond to the demand of hundreds of millions that still lack basic energy services. It's possible to secure justice for the seats and for the LDCs that are the most threatened without having contributed at all to climate change. To make all this happen, we need energy. But what kind of energy? Renewable energy are the only way that we can match the increasing demand of energy with the reduction of the CO2 emission that we need. ARENA is proud to be with the seats in these efforts. The seats have shown their ambition, their leadership in their package just presented in these days. We will be clear with them in these efforts, including through the Seats Lighthouse initiatives. I wish to thank Denmark, Germany, Norway, the UAE, my home house today, for providing a new wave of financial support to this end. It is possible for renewable to power the change. Renewables are good for the environment, good for the economy, good for a just transition. Renewables are increasingly the cheapest way to produce energy. They are creating jobs and improving gender balance. It's possible to mobilize financial resources for the change. In response to the Secretary General call for action, ARENA, C4All and UNDP, in coordination with the GCF, and with the lead support of Denmark, announced the climate investment platform yesterday. The platform will be inclusive, well-articulated, proactive, and agile in supporting seats and the other developed countries to review and implement the ambitious NDCs and facilitate the private sector engagement to accelerate the energy transition and scale up low-carbon resilient economic future. I have been honored today with you, leaders of the seats. We all have to do more. ARENA is ready.
Thank you so much.
And that's it for this edition of Press Briefings from the United Nations headquarters in New York. I'm Shane Seeley. Good night.